wRants. This is your host, Naomi Roberson. Welcome to Writing Rants, your podcast for all things writing. That's wRants, little w, big R. For this episode, I'll be discussing the film adaptation of the Tales of Despereaux by Kate DiCamillo. Before we get started, I do want to take a moment to say that when I was planning the Writing Rants podcast, I chose the title to be a bit punny, ironic, a little bit fun. I do hope that those of you who tune in gain something from our analysis. But I have to be honest, The Tales of Despereaux is one of my favorite books, and the film directed by Sam Fell and Robert Stephenhagen is one of the most egregious book-to-film adaptations I've seen since the travesty of the 2006 Aragon movie. So this episode will be a bit more true to name than I generally intend. So let's just dive in, shall we? For those of you who are unfamiliar with Kate DiCamillo, she is a young adult author. In many of her pieces, she actually addresses some pretty adult themes, like the desire of belonging, depression, finding oneself, abuse, and the question of free will. She actually takes these themes and boldly displays them for children, which I applaud in a genre that traditionally seeks to shield children from the shadowed, dark elements of life. In my opinion, she accomplishes this best in Because of Winn-Dixie, which details the friendship that grows between a lonely girl and a stray dog, The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane, which follows the emotional growth of a China doll rabbit, a personal favorite of mine, and also in the topic of today's episode, The Tales of Despereaux. Now I'm going to briefly summarize the plot points of the book. This will include a few spoilers. I'll try to keep them to a minimum, but don't let this episode discourage you from actually reading the book. There is so much more to be gained from the characterization, the dialogue, the symbolism, and overall Kate DiCamillo's writing voice. I highly recommend this book to children and adults alike. It's an utterly magnificent piece of literature, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. So, the summary. In the first chapter, we are introduced to our protagonist, an eponymous character, Despereaux. He is the run of his mouse litter. He's small, he has big ears, and his personality is equally unique. He's creative, he's romantic, he daydreams, and of course, he's shunned by his clan for it. But one day he hears music, he follows the sound, and this is where he meets/falls in love with the Princess P. Now, he is caught fraternizing with the humans, and is banished to the dungeon to be eaten by the rats. So jump forward a chapter or two, and we are introduced to our main antagonist, a rat named Ruscuro, or Ruscuro for short. There's actually a lot of symbolism in that name. It actually refers to the treatment of light and shade in drawing and painting, which can be pretty symbolic when you're talking about your main antagonist, but moving on, and I know I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, so for all of you who speak Italian or who know how to pronounce it correctly, I apologize for my mispronunciation. Anyhow, Ruscuro lives in the dungeon and is supposed to enjoy torturing prisoners. Instead, Ruscuro is obsessed with light, true to his name. He sneaks upstairs to the castle, and after a series of unfortunate events, he is rebuked by the princess and is haunted by her look of disgust. This is where he begins to plan to steal the princess and bring her down to the dungeon so he can always have a little piece of light and happiness. Despereaux, of course, overhears Ruscuro's plan and vows to protect and save the princess. And there you have the book in a general nutshell. There's a lot more that goes on, but that will essentially help you understand the rest of the podcast a little bit more. And now for the fun part. So the movie kicks you in the early on, like immediately. When I was writing my notes, I couldn't decide if I wanted to start with the horrible excuse for narration or the completely fabricated introduction to Ruscuro at the top of the film. And then I realized that my problem with both of these moments is the incorrect characterization. It's utterly appalling. The narrator introduces Despereaux, verbally, mind you. She actually talks about Despereaux right before we are shown Ruscuro. You know, ha ha, ironic. But she introduces Despereaux by saying that, quote, "There was a brave little mouse who loved honor and justice and always told the truth." And I just can't. Despereaux wasn't brave. As a matter of fact, his emotional journey to becoming a hero is predicated on the fact that he learned to be courageous and to be brave, and to channel that energy. At the very most, Despereaux is curious, which makes him careless about avoiding certain dangers, but he's certainly not brave, and I detest the screenwriters for blatantly saying so. You lie to me, movie. You lie. Okay, so on to the f***ing rat that we're introduced to immediately after the film starts. Yo, there's just so much wrong going on in this scene that I'm honestly struggling to articulate it. The rat is a f***ing pirate on a boat, okay? A pirate / adventurer on a boat with an implied friendship with one of the human crew members, and none of this happened. None of it. Literally none of it happened in the book, none of it is hinted at in the book. This is a complete figment of the screenwriter's imagination. And I have to ask Gary Ross, Will McRobb, and Chris Viscardi, why? Why waste your brain cells rewriting the character history of Ruscaro? Why? Did you even read the book? So in the book, Ruscaro is born into darkness in the dungeon, okay? So Kate DiCamillo introduces the idea of nature versus nurture. Is Ruscaro's villainy an act of circumstance, or something inbred in him since birth? That is a dope concept. We have a classic Byronic hero here, who is fighting a possible inevitability, and is just yearning for a small piece of light, a small piece of happiness, and meaning, and love, and acceptance. And this is in a children's book. In the movie, we have a rat character who lived most of his life in the light, and because of the one pivotal moment of causing the queen's death, he loses his freedom. So Ruscaro's lust for the light in the movie is reduced to the want of independence that he lost. Which, I mean, is not a bad internal conflict for a character to have. It's just remarkably and disappointingly monochromatic, especially after having read the book. Okay, but I'm just gonna move on because I could rant about this for hours. So let's see here. What do we have next? Oh, me. Okay, so quick summary. The rat and his human friend are visiting the town of Dor on Soup Day, and this is the scene that leads up to Ruscaro falling in the queen's soup, which kills her from shock. There are so many scenes between the chef and this spirit anthropomorphic-like thing made of vegetables in this part. And this is the point in the film where I had to pause to bash my head against the f***ing wall. First of all, we're subjected to over 6 minutes of soup porn nonsense that Kate DiCamillo summed up in 2 sentences in her book, essentially, hey, the queen likes soup, the end. Not, oh, we have soup day and we have to make all the soup and the perfect soup and let's focus on the chef. Second, this didn't happen in the book at all, okay? It doesn't make sense. The vegetable monster, it's literally just a sad attempt at padding the runtime of a horrible film so a production company can suck itself off. This vegetable monster consulting bullshit just pisses me off. It pissed me off then. I'm still pretty pissed about it. It just makes no sense. But I'm just gonna move on. I'm just gonna move on. So, finally, 15 minutes into this abomination of a movie based on a book, we finally get to meet the eponymous character, the main character, and we're still dragged through scene-setting, film padding nonsense. And the worst part of it all is that it just doesn't end. It doesn't end. We're forced to watch numerous scenes to highlight Despereaux's weirdness, which I think is overemphasized in the movie compared to the book. The way he interacts in school, we have to watch scenes of that. We have to watch scenes with him interacting with his siblings. And you know, okay, I'm just gonna skip the rant I prepared about the other smaller, incorrect, or poorly showcased portions of the movie, and just get straight to my main point. My main issue with this movie isn't that it's not a perfect representation of the book. A movie can use creative license in service of a greater story, but in this movie, the characters are constantly and continuously simplified in the important areas, while bloated in areas fabricated by the screenwriters for, no purpose that I can see, unless it's personal entertainment. I'm suddenly reminded here that Despereaux's brother Furlough actually brings him to the dungeon in the book to be executed, and in the movie, it's just a nameless mouse. And I don't think we really have to go into too much detail here for you to understand how pivotal a small change like that can be. In another scene, Despereaux is drawn to the princess from music and her beauty in the book. In the movie, it's because she's crying, and that reduces the strong and sensible and refined Princess P of the book to a common damsel in distress. There's a character, Miguel, who I'll get to in a minute, but in the book, we actually get to meet her father. He's imprisoned and depressed, and is only allowed one small comfort, and that's the red tablecloth for which he sold his daughter. In a bitter stage, Rutger actually tricks him out of that cloth. And this is a moment where, one, we get to see Rutger truly come into his Byronic hero status. Two, we get to see Rutger as a conflicted and in-depth antagonist. He's not purely evil, and we can almost come to understand and possibly even forgive his behavior. And three, we get the satisfaction of Mig's story coming full circle. The movie actually dubs an entirely different character as Mig's father for a cheap emotional payoff, because someone realized that they neglected to give the audience any reason to care about the film. Alright, so I promised I'd go back to Miguel. And my main reason for even bringing this up is to showcase what is lost in the film, so that it can add filler bullshit nonsense like the f***ing vegetable monster. I'm not over it. So in the book, Miguel is written to be the foil of Princess P. Both of their mothers died. In Miguel's case, her father then sells her to a man she simply calls uncle for a red tablecloth, a handful of cigarettes, and a hen. Talk about deep yet digestible content for children. Clap, 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 Kate DiCamillo. But of course, this f***ing movie skips most of that to boil it down. And the worst part is the movie's portrayal of Miguel's desire to be a princess, which becomes an important tool for Rutger to manipulate her into his plan later. The movie brushes it off as being a whim of every little girl. The movie says, quote, "At some point or another, every little girl wants to be a princess," end quote. Now, I'm going to completely ignore how sexist and dated that is to address how it completely abandons the integrity of the book. Kate DiCamillo's character does not always want to be a princess. In fact, despite her horrible situation, Miguel doesn't really yearn for a better life. This "I want to be a princess" aspect to Mig's character actually grows from a moment where she sees the royal entourage. Mig sees the glint of the sun off of the princess's crown and yearns for that light, which Miguel is not intelligent enough to really understand, and she decides that she wants the crown to be the princess. But this yearning for the light, whether the character knows it or not, ties her to Rutger later and makes her fall from grace understandable and redeemable. But it's the light, always the light in the book, that's important. And the 15 minutes of soup nonsense, the vegetable monster, and the 10 minutes we're forced to watch Despereaux be weird feels all the more cheap and useless now, doesn't it, when you realize that the movie completely abandons one of the main points of the book, the main points of symbolism. I could really just go on and on about the inconsistencies between the two pieces and how it makes the movie lacking, like this supposed friendship between Rutger and Despereaux that doesn't even happen in the book, but is forced into the movie to add some sort of conflict that didn't need to be there. And there's also the matter of Despereaux's mommy issues that he has in the book. That's completely ignored in the film. But anyway, we finally get to the end credits, and the audience is finally informed that the film was based on the Tales of Despereaux. It's more like loosely based, as in we took the title and the character names, but that's about it. I honestly would not be so enraged and frustrated with this film if they had said what every "this happened in real life" paranormal horror movie has the decency to say, that it was inspired by true events, that it was inspired by the book. If this movie had said that, this is inspired by the Tales of Despereaux, and they gave it a different name, I wouldn't have so much of an issue. It's just, it's not a bad movie, it's just a bad film adaptation of a book, of a wonderful, wonderful book that inspired my love for reading and for writing, aside from Pride and Prejudice, but this book was monumental to my career, and to see it butchered on film is just horrible for me. I could go on forever, but, I try to keep these podcasts under 15 minutes, and we're starting to hit around that mark, so this is where I'm going to leave you guys for today. For those of you who tuned in, I hope you enjoyed my ranting a little bit. I promise that our future episodes will have a little bit more substance. If you liked today's episode, please subscribe, leave comments, follow, share. The links to our social media will be in the description, as well as the link to our website. Feel free to take a look. If you have any book to film adaptations that you would like us to address in future episodes, mention them in the comments on social media, or you can reach us through our contact form on our website. Obviously, we can't promise to use all of your suggestions, but we will keep them in mind as we are developing our next episodes. If you are an author, we do conduct author interviews from time to time, so if that is something that you are interested in, please reach out to us. I think that just about covers everything, so until next week, happy writing!